Today, we'll look at the earliest primates from the Paleocene through the Oligocene. But let's begin with the quick review of the Mesozoic. The Mesozoic is the age of dinosaurs. Early primitive dinosaurs were present near the beginning of the Mesozoic. And although they were wiped out at 200 million years ago, the dinosaurs that we now know continued to live and became very important in the Cretaceous period. Early mammals were present by the Jurassic period by at least 178 million years ago. We see flowering plants by at least 140 million years ago. And during the Cretaceous, dinosaurs ruled the world. But they were wiped out by an asteroid impact at 65 million years ago, which marked also the end of the Mesozoic era and the beginning of the Cenozoic era. So, again, primitive dinosaurs were present by 240 million years ago during the Mesozoic era. But at 200 million years ago, huge volcanic eruptions caused mass extinctions. However, the non-primitive dinosaurs that we know became increasingly dominant following these eruptions, and they became increasingly abundant and diverse for the next 150 million years, up to the end of the Mesozoic era. And by 178 million years ago, mammals are present. And by 140 million years ago, flowering plants. At the end of the Mesozoic era, during the late Cretaceous period, dinosaurs dominated the world. But also present were small mammals, birds, and flowering plants. At 65 million years ago, an asteroid hit the Earth, wiping out the dinosaurs. This is called the End Cretaceous extinction event. The impact left behind a huge crater called Chicxulub in the Yucatan area of Mexico. You can see it circled in yellow here. The crater is more than 10 miles wide and likely involved a hit from an object about 6 miles across. The crash would have released as much energy as over 1 billion times the power of the atom bombs used in World War II. The impact blew dust, soil, and rocks all the way out into space, where it then fell back into the top of the atmosphere. The Earth was shrouded in a dust layer that blocked the sunlight for several weeks or months. For the first few hours after the impact, the debris falling back into the atmosphere from outer space would have created a storm of glowing fireballs, and the radiant energy from these would have heated the surface to boiling temperatures for some minutes. So many species living on the surface, such as dinosaurs, may have been decimated in hours or weeks. I include here a joke about the meteor that caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. You can come back and listen to this joke on your own. So the mass extinction at 65 million years ago marks the end of the Mesozoic era and the beginning of the Cenozoic era, which is our era. The Cenozoic era is divided into two periods, the Tertiary period, which we'll be talking about today, and the Quaternary period. We are currently living in the Quaternary period. Each period is divided into epochs. The epochs in our period, the Quaternary period, include the Pleistocene, or the Ice Age, and the Holocene, the current period in which we are living. But we won't talk about those until later. But for the Tertiary period, I do want you to memorize the names of the epochs in order from oldest to most recent. One way to do this is to remember PEOMP. So the oldest epoch in the Tertiary period is the Paleocene, followed by the Eocene, then the Oligocene, the Miocene, and the Pliocene. Now, to learn the names of the epochs in the Tertiary period, first of all note that each name ends in "cene." and that the initials of each of these in stratigraphic order from oldest to most recent almost spells poem. Instead, it's P, Paleocene, Eocene, Oligocene, Miocene, Pliocene. And how do you remember which of the two P's is older? Well, the one that starts with paleo. How can you spell them? What I've learned is that you need to say each word out loud. That way you won't miss syllables. Okay, here we are in the Tertiary period. Dinosaurs are extinct. The mammals are diversifying, moving into all those niches left by the dead dinosaurs. And it's during this period that we see the first primates. However, there's a debate over when we see the earliest primates because they are very primitive. And eventually, it's during this period that we see the first humans. I'll give you a brief outline of what we're going to cover. In the Paleocene epoch, from 66 to 55 million years ago, we have disputed first primates called the Plesiadapiforms. Now these are disputed because, for one, the earliest ones are mouse-sized, and they're even more primitive than prosimians. And if you recall, prosimians are more primitive than the anthropoids, or the description that we give of primates. But by the early Eocene, 55 million years ago, we have undisputed first primates. And for the most part, these are prosimians. By the middle to late Eocene, we see the first anthropoids, which includes the Tarsier lineage and the Hominidae, which led to monkeys and apes, or our lineage. So these are the first non-prosimian primates. During the Oligocene epoch, the New World monkeys split off from our lineage. So the New World monkeys split off from the Old World monkeys, apes, human lineage. And during the Miocene epoch, the Old World monkeys split off from the ape-human lineage, and at the end of that epoch, we find the origins of humans. Let's begin with the Paleocene epoch. Here, dinosaurs are extinct and temperatures are rising. You can see that North America and Eurasia, the old Laurasia, is starting to pull apart and form islands in between. But it's still tropical up in these reaches of the world. You can also see that Gondwana has already split up into separate landforms of South America, Africa, India, Australia, and Antarctica. During this time period, we see major mammal radiation, that is, diversification, to fill the niches left by the dinosaurs. And some of the small mammals are primate-like, potentially primitive primates or archaic primates, and they are found in Laurasia, which at the time was tropical. So these early primate-like mammals, that is, these contested primates, not everyone agrees that they're primates, are found beginning in the early Paleocene all the way through to the late Eocene. And they're found mostly in Laurasia, what became North America and Europe. And in particular, we'll talk about the Plesiadapiforms. These earliest fossils are found in Montana at 65 million years ago. The Plesiadapiforms ranged from mouse size among the earliest ones to small monkey-sized, but with a great diversity of over 120 species. The problem with saying that these are early primates is that anatomically they're more primitive than any living primate, even the prosimians. If you look at the skull on the left-hand side here, it looks more like a rat skull than a primate skull. It has these large incisors with a gap, a diastema, between them and the rest of the teeth. You can see that the eyes are unprotected, and there's quite a long, narrow snout. The earliest skeleton we have is Stryomomes. And as I said, people do not agree whether or not these are primates. Why aren't we sure when the earliest primates appear? Well, first of all, we have very incomplete fossil remains. At the earliest times, mostly just teeth or jaws and some skull fragments. And again, these plesiadapiforms don't even have the characteristics of living prosimians. Thus, those who do call them primates call them archaic primates. And a second reason is that scientists don't agree on how to classify these plesiadapiforms. Some do consider them archaic primates. Some consider them experiments in becoming primates, but they're still just primate-like mammals. And some consider them to be in the lineage of tree shrews, not primates. So the earliest is the genus Dryomomys. It has some primate-like characteristics in the teeth, the ear, and at least one has a fingernail instead of all claws. So let's compare the plesiadapiforms to the prosimians. Recall, prosimians do not have all the characteristics that we say characterize primates. So prosimians do have a postorbital bar, so there is some bone around the eye. But plesiadapiforms don't have that, protecting the eye. Plesiadapiforms' eyes face out to the side. Therefore, they would not have had the same stereoscopic vision that primates today have. Prosimians' eyes are more forward, although they do face out a tiny bit. Plesiadapiforms have those rodent-like incisors. Prosimians do have, in the front, a dental comb incisors for grooming themselves. Plesiadapiforms have a diastema, or a gap, between the incisors and the canines, whereas prosimians don't have that. Prosimians do have a slightly bigger brain than the plesiadapiforms. And most of the plesiadapiforms have only claws, whereas prosimians have fingernails with only one grooming claw. So when we find the earliest undisputed primates, ones that everyone can agree are primates, is the Eocene epoch, 55 million years ago. And at this time it's very warm, even in the north. It's during this time that the rainforest formed. And Laurasia doesn't separate into North America versus Eurasia until the middle Eocene. These first undeniable primates are found in North America, Europe, Asia, and Africa. And this is the peak of the prosimians. We see at least 60 different genera of prosimians. Now, why does everyone agree that these are primates? Well, they have a slightly larger brain than the plesiadapiforms. The eye sockets are in the front of the face, so they have the stereoscopic vision and depth perception that we expect primates to have. The eye socket is better protected. It has a postorbital bar. It has an opposable big toe, and it has nails rather than all claws, and the snout is not so long. As I said, these early Eocene prosimians lived in North America, Europe, Asia, and Africa. And they had a dental comb for grooming. Some were nocturnal, some were diurnal, that is, active in the daytime. Some ate leaves, that is, they were folivores, and some ate fruit and insects. They are arboreal, living in trees, and initially their locomotion is by vertical clinging and leaping, changing over through time to more arboreal quadrupedalism. However, compared to anthropoids, a larger portion of their brain is devoted to smell, whereas in our lineage, more of our brain is devoted to sight. And they were small, squirrel-sized, up to medium, up to about 15 pounds. Here are some examples of two different species. The current theory about why primate characteristics developed in these earliest prosimians is called the visual predation theory. It states that in searching for fruit and insects on slender branches, an animal would be favored who has forward-facing eyes, that is, stereoscopic vision and good depth of field, over smell. and one that had grasping hands and feet with nails instead of claws. Now, by the middle to late Eocene, we find the oldest definite anthropoid primates, that is, non-prosimians. I am using the word anthropoid, which is a bit out of date, because it now includes tarsiers, monkeys, apes, and humans, and leaves out the prosimians like the lemurs. Just to remind you, on the left-hand side are some of the modern-day lemurs. And you can see that the galago has that reflecting eye, the tapetum in the back of the eye, and some of the modern anthropoids, which includes New World monkeys, Old World monkeys, apes, both great apes, lesser apes, and humans. I feel like I should say stop the presses, because we now have an early anthropoid primate fossil as old as the earliest uncontested prosimian fossil. This fossil is from central China and dates to 55 million years ago. It's tiny, under 3 inches long, and less than 30 grams in weight. It ate insects and lived on a humid tropical lake shore. It probably was active in the daytime. And most amazingly, they found a 50% complete skeleton. This shows you where it would be on the family tree. So you can see that it's after the prosimians split off, and this is at the base of the kind of the stem that includes tarsiers, New World monkeys, Old World monkeys, lesser apes, great apes, and humans. So it's the first that we have found so far, anthropoid. And what's also amazing is that it's found in Asia. Up until this find, people thought that the earliest prosimians, the earliest anthropoids would all be found in Africa, but instead it's looking as though they're being found in Asia. So when we compare prosimians to anthropoids, both have prehensile hands and feet, that is, they grasp, and they are pentadactyl hands and feet, that is, they have 5 digits. Both have clavicles, and both have some protection around the eye socket. They both have postorbital bars. However, only in anthropoids do the eyes face totally forward, giving them total stereoscopic vision. Whereas prosimians, the eyes face out just a little bit to the sides, and so their stereoscopic vision is not quite as good. Prosimians are nocturnal. Therefore, they have black and white vision, and their eyes have the tapetum, which reflects light. Whereas anthropoids are active in the day, they have color vision, and their eyes do not have that reflecting tapetum. Also, the anthropoids, the eyes are completely enclosed by bone, both to the sides, as the postorbital bar does, but also behind the eyes. Whereas the prosimians are lacking the postorbital plate behind the eye. Prosimians have a longer snout, and more of the brain is devoted to the sense of smell than to sight, whereas anthropoids have shorter snouts, and more of the brain is devoted to sight than to smell. Prosimians have that moist, naked nose, and anthropoids have the dry nose. And if you recall, anthropoids have high facial mobility, lots of muscles in the face. The prosimians have less facial mobility. Whereas anthropoids have only fingernails with tactile pads, prosimians have nails, but the second digit is a grooming claw. Prosimians have more teeth than do anthropoids. Prosimians have a dental comb in front. Anthropoids do not. We see more sexual dimorphism, that is, differences between male and female, in the anthropoids than we do the prosimians. And anthropoids have a longer infancy. A greater percentage of their life is spent in infancy. And usually anthropoids give birth to only one child at a time, whereas prosimians may bear 2 to 3 young. Anthropoids also don't do vertical clinging and leaping, whereas we think many of the earliest prosimians locomoted that way. And again, here it's showing you the difference between the completely enclosed bone around the eye, protecting the sight, on the left side here for anthropoids, and the presence of just the simple postorbital bar but no bone behind the eye among prosimians. So by the middle to late Eocene, following this find from China, we see three groups of primates. The Adapidae, which is the prosimian lineage, still continuing, because of course we still have prosimians today. The Tarsidae, the tarsier lineage, which is a strange combination of the prosimian and the anthropoid lineages. And the Myrmidiidae, the monkey-ape lineage, or our lineage, which is why I darkened this. And by the end of the Eocene, many of the prosimians are extinct, probably pushed out by the anthropoids. Now there's disagreement over where and what are the earliest in our lineage, the monkey-ape lineage. One reason is we find mostly teeth and limb fragments. One place where these fossils are found is Fayum in northeastern Africa, in present-day Egypt. We find here Catopithecus and other genera dating to 40 million years ago. However, in recent years, more fossils are being found in Asia than in Africa. And it appears that during this time, Africa was kind of an island all by itself. And instead, the primate evolution was really taking place in Asia, and only later, when Africa got closer to the rest of Asia, did the primates move from Asia back into Africa. This map shows some of the fossil localities where we find Eocene and Oligocene anthropoids. That is tarsier, monkey, ape, human lineage. So the Oligocene, 34 million to 23 million years ago, is the age of the anthropoids, and a cooling trend begins. Continents are drifting away from the equator, and an ice cap formed over Antarctica. And at this time, North America and Eurasia separated from each other. That is, Laurasia split into two separate areas. And North and South America are not yet joined. So South America is an island all by itself out in the ocean. But it's during this period that the Great Rift Valley of Eastern Africa formed, and India connected to Asia, forming the Himalaya Mountains. And as climate cooled, primates disappeared in the northern hemisphere. So near the beginning of the Oligocene, the continents were in these positions. I've mentioned Fayum, Egypt, which is a famous fossil locality. Today, this place in northeastern Africa is a desert, but back then it was a tropical rainforest. And remember, it's cold now in the northern hemisphere, and American primate fossils are rare. It's during the Oligocene that among the anthropoids, we see a split between the New World monkey and the Old World monkey-ape lineages. So the Parapithecid family, which is ancestral to the New World monkeys, versus the Propliopithecid family, which is ancestral to us, to the Old World monkeys, apes, and humans. These two families split apart, leaving us with an unsolved puzzle, because the Parapithecids, which are ancestral to the New World monkeys, are first found in Africa from 34 to 31 million years ago during the Oligocene. And they're not found in South America until the end of the Oligocene at 25 million years ago. So in other words, New World monkeys originated in Africa. But during the Oligocene, South America was at least 3,000 kilometers from Africa across an ocean. Granted, at that time there were islands between the two, but there were at least 200 kilometers of ocean between islands connecting the two continents. So how did monkeys get from Africa across an ocean to South America. I know the answer sounds unbelievable, but the current hypothesis is that they rafted over on large mats of vegetation. And that makes it sound like they deliberately set out with paddles, but what we think is that they were up in trees, a huge storm hit on the west coast of Africa, the trees fell into the ocean with the monkeys up in the branches, and the trees, the whole bunch of trees and vegetation with vines holding together, floated across the ocean with the monkeys up on top, landing in South America. And certainly the ocean currents could have done that. So again, during the Oligocene, the New World monkeys separate out from the Old World monkeys, apes, and humans. So one of the earliest members that we see of the Propliopithecid family, which is ancestral to the Old World monkeys, apes, and humans, is the genus Egyptopithecus, found at the famous fossil locality of Fayum at 34 million years ago. This creature was arboreal, weighed 10 to 18 pounds, and it had a reduction in the teeth that is typical of our lineage. So to summarize the major events in the Paleocene, Eocene, and Oligocene, we begin with continents not in their present locations. Dinosaurs are already extinct, but mammals are diversifying, what we call mammal radiation. And until the Oligocene, temperatures were warm. All the continents were tropical. In the Paleocene, immediately after the asteroid hit, we see some primate-like mammals called the Plesiadapiforms. And they're actually found up in what had been Laurasia, up in present-day North America. But we don't have definite primates, ones that everybody agrees are primates, until the Eocene, 55 million years ago. Traditionally, these were all thought to be prosimians. So Eocene, it's still very warm temperatures. We have both mammals and primates of modern aspect. And as I said, traditionally, we've always thought the earliest primates were prosimians. But wait, now we have an anthropoid, that is something that could have become a tarsier or a New World monkey, Old World monkey, ape, or human, also at 55 million years ago in China. Nevertheless, we're sticking with our visual predation theory to explain the development of these earliest primates. The Eocene is the peak of the prosimians. This is when they are most diversified and the most prominent type of primate. But by the end, they are pushed out by the anthropoids. During the Oligocene, as continents are moving apart, there's a cooling trend. So as the continents are moving away from the equator, the northern hemisphere is becoming cold and primates disappear from the northern hemisphere. During the middle to late Oligocene, we see an increase in definite anthropoids, first in Asia and then moving back into Africa. And that also creates a little bit of a problem because Africa was kind of an island still at that time. How did they get from Asia to Africa? This is also new that we haven't worked it out yet, new in terms of fossil finds. So the Oligocene can be seen as the age of anthropoids. They become more numerous than prosimians, and many of the prosimians go extinct. Many of the modern-day prosimians are stuck out on islands where anthropoids did not make it out to take over their ecological niches. It's during the Oligocene that New World monkeys split away from the Old World monkey-ape lineage and potentially rafted over to South America. So to review, we have the epochs of Paleocene, Eocene, Oligocene, and Miocene. And Pliocene, which of course we haven't talked about yet. So 66 million years ago, at about the time of the asteroid hit that wiped out the dinosaurs. During the Paleocene, we have potential primitive primates that are disputed. These are called plesiodaphiforms. But during the Eocene, we have not only the earliest prosimians, we also have the earliest anthropoids. And by the Oligocene, we see a lot more anthropoids, and we see the splitting of the New World monkeys from the Old World monkeys, apes, human lineage.